They say lightning never strikes the same place twice. But there's one man who defies all odds.
Down goes the champion!
Once in a generation, a warrior emerges, who transforms violence into art and fear into legend. With fists carved from stone and a left hook that could crumble mountains. He became the hunter that other hunters feared. From the favelas of São Paulo to a new arena with equal danger. This is the legend of Alex Poatan Pereira, the Stone Hand, the most dangerous and feared striker on earth. The left hook came like thunder in a clear sky. One moment, Israel Adesanya was dominating the third round of their Glory kickboxing match. The next, he was unconscious on the canvas, his undefeated streak shattered by a man who'd learned to fight because he couldn't stop drinking. This wasn't just a knockout. This was the moment Alex Poatan Pereira announced himself as the most dangerous striker on the planet. But more than that, it was proof that a kid from the favelas who'd hit rock bottom could rise to conquer not just one combat sport, but two. The man they call Stone Hand has become one of the most feared fighters in the world. A two-division UFC champion whose journey from alcoholic construction worker to global superstar reads like something out of a movie. July 7th, 1987, São Paulo, Brazil. In one of the city's sprawling favelas, a boy named Alexandro Silva Pereira was born into a world where survival meant making impossible choices every single day. The favelas aren't just poor neighborhoods. They're urban jungles where violence, drugs, and desperation create a cycle that traps generation after generation. Alex's family had nothing. Not money, not connections, not hope. When other kids his age were learning to read and write, Alex was learning something else entirely. That if you wanted to eat, if you wanted to survive, you had to be willing to do whatever it took. At 12 years old, Alex Pereira made a decision that would define the next decade of his life. He dropped out of middle school and went to work. Not part-time, not summers only. Full-time, manual labor in a tire shop where the work was dangerous. And the environment was toxic in ways that went far beyond the chemicals.
Trabalhar cedo, né, em uma borracharia, com 12 anos de idade.
Com 12 já fazia.
12 anos de idade, fazendo trampo ali de adulto, entendeu? Pô, com 12 anos de idade, pô, já comecei ali, lógico, não conseguia fazer tudo, porque o trabalho era muito pesado.
Picture a 12-year-old boy, barely 5 feet tall, spending his days surrounded by grown men who'd given up on dreams, who medicated their pain with whatever they could get their hands on.
De trabalhar, ser cara bacana e tal, eu aprendi também a beber. E isso eu não tive controle, né, com a bebida. E, pô, cada vez eu ia bebendo mais, E eu bebia hoje... todos os dias, cara, todos os dias. Não tinha, era difícil um dia que eu... Nessa época aí que eu tava, pô, já perdidão mesmo, eu bebia quase 1 litro por dia, entendeu?
Você tá louco.
Meio que não sei se é o nome correto, um ritual, assim, tipo, até meio-dia eu tomava 3 cachaças. Era uma às 10, uma às 11 e outra meio-dia.
Most people can't comprehend that level of alcohol consumption. But for Alex, it became as routine as breathing. The drinking didn't stop when the workday ended. If anything, it got worse.
Eu chegava tarde em casa, chegava no outro dia, ia pras festinhas, pros rolês e ia trabalhar no outro dia. Trabalhar no outro dia, então isso me atrapalhava muito. Chegava atrasado todo dia, entendeu? Então isso me atrapalhou muito.
At 21 years old, Alex Pereira was at a crossroads. He could continue down the path he was on, working dead-end jobs, drinking himself into oblivion, or he could make a change that might save his life. The decision to walk into Balakwaera's kickboxing academy for the first time wasn't about becoming a fighter. It was about becoming human again. What Alex didn't expect was that this gym would change more than just his relationship with alcohol. It would reconnect him with something he'd never even known he'd lost: his heritage. I'm 100% native Brazilian, Alex explains. My parents are both from the native tribal people who lived in Brazil before anyone else came here. Growing up in the urban sprawl of São Paulo, native heritage and traditions weren't subjects that came up often. The favelas are survival zones where cultural identity gets sacrificed for more immediate needs like food and shelter. But this particular kickboxing gym happened to be made up primarily of native Brazilians. And suddenly, Alex found himself learning not just how to throw punches and kicks, but about his own roots and ancestry.
O que acontece? Esse meu primeiro treinador, que é o Beloca, perguntou pra mim um dia, falou, pô, seu pai, sua mãe, os seus avós, será que não tem uma ligação com esse povo e tal? Eu falei, cara, eu nunca vi não sei. Pô, pergunta e tal. Eu cheguei em casa no mesmo dia, perguntei. Meu pai e minha mãe, eles falaram que os avós deles eram tipo, a minha música de entrada. Desde quando eu comecei a lutar, eu entro com essa música. É uma música que eles fizeram no Xingu e tal. Fizeram com os índios e eu faço essa minha entrada. E aí uma coisa que eu criei foi a minha entrada, atirando ali, fazendo um arco e flecha, que seria um símbolo ali dos índios.
His trainer, Beloca was the one who gave him the nickname that would follow him to global stardom. In Brazil's native Tupi language, po means hand, and atan means something solid, dense, stone-like. Poatan, stone hand.
Poatan também, ele que me deu esse apelido, que significa mão forte. Aí eu coloquei essa pedra aqui, ó.
Ah, não tinha visto aí.
Aí uns me chamam de mão de pedra, entendeu? Então, Poatan.
O Globo falou isso aí.
Poatan é mão forte. Sim. Aí eu gosto de mão de pedra.
It was more than just a fighting nickname. It was a connection to an identity that had been buried under years of poverty and addiction. Alex commemorated this awakening by tattooing a collection of rocks and pebbles on his left hand, the same hand that would eventually become the most feared weapon in combat sports. But before the world knew about the stone hand, Alex had to prove it worked. His amateur boxing career became the stuff of legend in Brazilian combat sports circles. 28 amateur boxing matches, 25 wins, all 25 by knockout. Just 3 losses, and reportedly all 3 came against the same opponent. The footage of young Alex Pereira in amateur boxing rings is genuinely shocking. This wasn't just a powerful puncher, this was someone who seemed to possess supernatural knockout ability. There's viral footage of him literally knocking opponents out of the ring with single shots, sending grown men flying through the ropes like they'd been hit by a car. Ryan Garcia, one of boxing's biggest stars, would later watch this footage and publicly express interest in training with Alex, admitting how difficult it is to achieve knockouts in amateur boxing, where the equipment and rules are designed to prevent exactly that. But Alex wasn't just knocking people out. He was doing it with an efficiency that bordered on frightening. The transition from amateur boxing to professional kickboxing felt natural. Alex had found his calling, and more importantly, he'd found a way to channel the violence that had once gotten him into trouble on the streets. Every punch he threw in training was a punch not thrown in some drunken brawl. Every hour in the gym was an hour not spent destroying his liver with alcohol. In 2012, at the age of 25, Alex made his professional kickboxing debut at Jungle Fight 37 against Clay Silva.
E também o trabalho de boxe. O Alexandre Pereira. Ele tenta ali ajoelhar, bem bloqueada pelo Clay. Clay tentou, entrou à esquerda, entrou dura. Foi lá, coloca a esquerda de novo. Entra à esquerda de novo. Outra vez à esquerda 3 vezes. Tá perdido, entrou à esquerda, apagou. Ainda groga, ainda cambaleante. Vai pra cima o Alexandre. Momentos finais do round. Ele vai colocando golpes. Tá entregue Clay Silva.
He finished Silva in the very first round and captured the promotion's middleweight title in his very first professional fight. It was the kind of debut that makes people take notice. But Alex was just getting started. After establishing himself in Brazil, he moved to WGP Kickboxing, where he captured his first international title in 2015. But Alex had bigger dreams. He wanted to test himself against the best kickboxers in the world, and that meant one destination: Glory Kickboxing. Glory was the premier kickboxing organization on the planet, featuring the most elite strikers from every corner of the globe. For a kid from the São Paulo favelas, fighting in Glory was like a baseball player making it to the major leagues. It represented the absolute pinnacle of the sport. Alex's Glory debut came at Glory 14, where he entered the last man standing middleweight tournament, where he would have to win 2 fights in a single night. In his first fight, he faced Dustin Jacoby, destroying him in round 1. Up next was a tough Armenian by the name of Sahak Parparian. Alex dropped his opponent in the first round and went on to win a unanimous decision. Over the next few years, Alex went on a tear through Glory's middleweight division. He faced and defeated some of the most dangerous strikers in the world, establishing himself as a legitimate title contender. But it was 2 specific fights that would change not just his career, but the entire landscape of combat sports. In April 2016, at Glory of Heroes 1 in Shenzhen, China, Alex faced a rising Nigerian-New Zealand kickboxer named Israel Adesanya. The last stylebender was on an 11-fight winning streak and was being hailed as the future of the sport. The fight was competitive, back and forth, the kind of technical battle that showcases the highest level of striking. When the final bell rang, Alex got the unanimous decision victory. It was a good win against a quality opponent. What nobody watching knew is that this was the start of MMA's biggest rivalry, a rivalry that would span over 8 years and 2 different combat sports. March 4th, 2017, Glory of Heroes 15 in São Paulo, Brazil. Alex was fighting at home, in front of his people, against the same man who many believed had deserved to win their first encounter. For 2 rounds, it looked like Adesanya might get his revenge. He was outstriking Alex, controlling the distance, looking every bit like the superior fighter. Then came the 3rd round. 1 minute and change into the final frame, Alex threw a perfect counter left hook that caught Adesanya clean on the chin. The future UFC middleweight champion dropped like he'd been shot, unconscious before he hit the canvas. It was Adesanya's first knockout loss as a professional, and it would haunt him for years to come. But for Alex, it was validation. The Stone Hand wasn't just a nickname, it was a prophecy. That knockout of Adesanya launched Alex into kickboxing superstardom. In 2017, he captured the Glory Middleweight Championship by defeating Simon Marcus at Glory 46 in China. He defended the title 5 times over the next few years, establishing himself as the most dominant middleweight in the sport. But Alex wasn't satisfied with ruling just one division. In 2019, he did something that had never been done in Glory's history. He moved up to light heavyweight and captured that title as well. The achievement was historic, but it also marked the end of an era. Alex had conquered kickboxing. He was a 2-division champion, a global star, a man who'd transformed himself from an alcoholic construction worker into one of the most feared strikers on the planet. In 2018, Alex Pereira started paying attention to what his old rival, Israel Adesanya, was doing in this thing called mixed martial arts.
I'm the new dog in the yard, and I just all over this cage.
It's going around. Oh, he's hurt, man. Oh, another knockdown.
By 2020, Israel Adesanya had become the UFC middleweight champion, one of the biggest stars in all of sports. He was undefeated in the division, seemingly untouchable, being hailed as one of the greatest strikers in MMA history. He was getting the recognition, the money, and the global platform that Alex had always dreamed of. As it looked less and less likely that anybody could defeat Israel Adesanya, footage began to surface of the UFC champion being knocked out cold by Pereira. The rumor mill started turning as MMA fans and media began to hear of Alex's transition into MMA. Although Alex had only just began training in mixed martial arts, he made it very clear he was looking to take everything that Israel Adesanya had built.
That was the Glory World title fight, and I won that fight, but then I didn't finish the guy. People were like, oh, well, that's what happens when you leave it to the judges. And even the same guy now he watches all my fights, and every time I fight, like clockwork, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. At the end of the day, no one knows who the f he is, and he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time.
Assim que o Israel entrou pro UFC, é claro que eu fiquei de olho, porque eu já tinha o interesse, né, de lutar MMA. Aquele vídeo que postaram, né, uma entrevista que o Israel Adesanya fez, me motivou muito, te desafiado. E quando eu sou desafiado, ninguém me segura. Eu queria novos desafios e era o UFC.
It wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet confidence of a man who'd already proven he could beat Adesanya when it mattered most. But there was one massive problem. Alex didn't know how to fight on the ground. Kickboxing is purely a striking sport. No takedowns, no submissions, no grappling whatsoever. MMA, on the other hand, requires competence in every aspect of fighting. At 33 years old, Alex was about to start learning an entirely new skill set from scratch. His MMA debut at Jungle Fight 82 was a humbling experience. He faced Quemuel Otoni and lost by submission in the first round. The defeat was a wake-up call. Raw striking power wasn't enough in this sport. He needed to become a complete fighter. Alex dedicated himself to learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and all the other skills that make up modern mixed martial arts. He continued competing in kickboxing while simultaneously building his MMA resume, fighting often and improving with each outing. By 2020, he'd compiled a modest 3-1 MMA record, but more importantly, he'd developed enough ground skills to feel confident that he could survive in the UFC's Shark Tank. The UFC's decision to fast-track Alex's pursuit of Adesanya was unprecedented. Usually, fighters have to work their way up the rankings slowly, proving themselves against increasingly difficult competition. But Alex's history with the champion, combined with his devastating performance at LFA, convinced Dana White and the UFC brass that this rivalry was too compelling to develop slowly. Alex made his UFC debut on November 6, 2021, at UFC 268 in Madison Square Garden, the most famous arena in the world. His opponent was Andreas Michailidis, a solid veteran who was supposed to test the kickboxing champion's MMA skills.
All octagon side tonight for the UFC debut of Alex Pereira.
Is a legitimate contender. 3 months later, even when the knockout didn't come early. But the UFC and its fans wanted fireworks, and Alex's next opponent promised exactly that. Sean Strickland was a dangerous, well-rounded fighter who'd been calling out everyone in the division. He was exactly the kind of test that would prove whether Alex belonged at the top of the middleweight division. July 2nd, 2022. UFC. It's extraordinary. The arena erupted. The commentators lost their minds. Dana White was already calculating pay-per-view numbers. With 3 wins in 8 months, Alex had done something that usually takes years. He'd earned a UFC title shot. More importantly, he'd earned the chance to settle the score with the man who'd been haunting his dreams for years. The build-up to UFC 281 was unlike anything the sport had ever seen. This wasn't just a title fight. It was the culmination of a rivalry that had spanned 2 sports, 2 continents, and 7 years. Israel Adesanya was the undefeated champion, the man who'd never lost at middleweight, the striker who'd been called untouchable. Alex Pereira was the ghost from his past, the one man who'd proven that Adesanya could be hurt, could be stopped, could be beaten. In the weeks leading up to the fight, the psychological warfare was intense.
He's very one-dimensional. He's early on in this game as well. So I'm even glad to get him now.
Adesanya tried to downplay their kickboxing history, claiming that MMA was a different sport and that Alex's previous victories meant nothing.
You're gonna be alone inside that octagon without a team.
Oh yes, you and me. Don't worry. Talk on you want. Talk on you want. Because trust me, they can't save you either when you're locked in there with me.
But everyone could see the truth. Adesanya was nervous. For the first time in his UFC career, he was facing someone who genuinely scared him. Alex, meanwhile, remained calm. He'd been here before. The only difference was that this time, there would be gold on the line. November 12th, 2022. Madison Square Garden, New York City. UFC 281, Adesanya versus Pereira. Two of the most dangerous strikers on the planet fighting for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. Adesanya, this time with a UFC championship on the line. The arena exploded. Alex dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd accomplished. From the favelas of São Paulo to the pinnacle of combat sports in just 14 months of UFC competition. It was the fastest rise to a UFC title in modern history, achieved by a man who'd started training MMA just 7 years earlier. The rematch was inevitable. Adesanya had earned the right to try to reclaim his title, and the UFC was eager to capitalize on the rivalry while it was still white-hot. 4 months and 26 days after losing his belt, Adesanya got his chance at redemption. April 8, 2023, UFC 287 in Miami. This time it was suggested he'd be more comfortable at light heavyweight. More importantly, the 205-pound division had just lost its champion when Jamal Hill vacated the title due to injury, leaving a vacant throne that Alex believed he could claim.
Division up, to keep the division moving forward, to keep entertaining, to make sure the people had a champion. And I'll do the same.
On April 13, 2023, just 5 days after losing the middleweight title, Alex announced on Twitter that he was moving up to light heavyweight.
Próxima luta será nos 205. Isso mesmo, a minha próxima luta será nos 205.
The hunt for a second UFC championship was about to begin. His light heavyweight debut came against former champion Jan Błachowicz, a crafty veteran who'd proven he could hang with the elite of the division. The fight was competitive, back and forth. November 11th, 2023, UFC 295 at Madison Square Garden. Alex faced former light heavyweight champion Yuri Prochazka for the vacant title, with a chance in history to win championships in 2 different weight divisions.
Yellow, trying to become the 9th fighter in UFC history to realize the title in a second division.
What followed was a masterclass in championship fighting. Alex defended his light heavyweight title 3 times in 2024, each defense more impressive than the last. On April 13th, at UFC 300, he started 2.5 months later at UFC 303, he rematched Yuri Prochazka and somehow finished him even.
I mean, this guy is just something special.
On October 5th at UFC 307, Alex faced his toughest test yet in Khalil Rountree Jr., a heavy-hitting contender who pushed him deeper into a fight than he'd been in years. 5 days, setting a UFC record for the shortest time span between 3 consecutive title defenses. By early 2025, Alex Pereira looked invincible. He was finishing elite fighters with ease, breaking records, and establishing himself as one of the most dominant champions in UFC history. Then came March 8, 2025, and a reality check that reminded everyone how quickly fortunes can change in combat sports. At UFC 313, Alex faced Magomed Ankalaev, a grappling-heavy contender who presented a different kind of challenge than the strikers Alex had been demolishing.
God bless.
For 5 rounds, Ankalaev implemented a wrestling-heavy game plan that neutralized Alex's striking and left the champion looking frustrated and ineffective. When the final bell rang, Alex had lost his title by unanimous decision. The defeat was a humbling reminder that even the most dominant champions can be vulnerable to the right style and the right opponent. At 37 years old, Alex Pereira isn't done making history. The man who overcame alcoholism, poverty, and every obstacle life could throw at him isn't about to let one loss define the end of his story. He's already proven that championships can be reclaimed, that comebacks are possible, that the human spirit is capable of incredible resilience. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Alex's journey isn't the titles he's won or the records he's broken. It's the transformation from a broken kid drinking himself to death in a São Paulo tire shop to a global icon who's inspired millions around the world. His story isn't just about combat sports, it's about the power of second chances, about finding purpose in the darkest moments, about discovering that sometimes the thing that saves you is the thing you never saw coming.